There are many of us who are in hardships and struggles. For the people of Gaza, for the people of Pakistan, and all those who are oppressed across the world, for your marhumin in mind, inshallah, Fatiha. Please recite one better salawat than that, please, for me. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين على عبد المعيد الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل البيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعن الله أعداءهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله ولرسوله إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه وأنه إليه تحشرون. Rediscovering Islam has been our topic. Tonight is lecture number 4. The attempt has been made since day number 1 for us to now, in the name of this year's Muharram, attempt to redefine Islam in our lives. To go back to the chalkboard, go back to the drawing board and see at what level does the Iman that exists inside of me exist. And yesterday we talked a little bit about balance in Islam. And one point I want to clarify from yesterday, I had a brother mention this to me after the majlis, and I want to make sure there's no confusion. We talked about the idea that the Ahlul Bayt came about to bring about moderation in Islam. That path down the middle, that Amr bayn al-Amrayn, as they say. To avoid extremes in our society. And I made the point that a balanced Muslim is also a moderate Muslim. Now, when we say a moderate Muslim, it has a little bit of a different connotation in this day and age. What I was not attempting to say was to become a moderate Muslim like perhaps you have in your mind. Where one day we are Deendar, the next day we are Dini. Where one day we are towards the Musalla praying Salat, one day we decide we'll do a little tricky when it comes to namaz. This moderation was not what I was talking about. The moderation I was referring to was the lack of ifrat and tafrit in society. That idea where sometimes we are excessive when it comes to what we're doing, sometimes we are deficient when it comes to what we are doing. And especially when it comes to those areas where we are happy and we are sad. Our gham and khushi has ifrat and tafrit in it. And the Ahlul Bayt came about to bring to us this idea that in everything that you do, find a balance. Don't go excessive on this side, don't become deficient on this side. The examples are many. For example, when it comes to the wedding of our children, I have myself experienced individuals who are pious, muttaqi, deendar, mazhabi. Every single program they're there, they're reading salat in the very first saf behind the imam. When it comes time for the wedding of their daughter, all of that is forgotten. خارج شو تحصل. والصلوات على محمد. And it's almost as if they tell themselves that, look, all of that I've done throughout the year is on one side, this one day of my daughter's khushi is another side. And when you ask them, so look, you are, let's say, involved in the committee, you're one of the few that opened the center, etc., they say, look, it's only one day, Maulana. I have one daughter, that's it. Let me do a nice big shadi, mixed gathering, music, everything, and then go back to my service for the community. This is ifrat and tafreet in society. And the Ahlul Bayt came to stop all this. So please, don't think for a moment I gave all of you a ticket to become moderate Muslims yesterday. I didn't do that. I was simply talking about a balance in our lives. The ayat that is the base of our discussion from Surah Anfal, ayat number 24. And for those of you who have been with me since day number 1, the discussion has been around finding hayat and zindagi from this Farshi Azam. Where this ayat is talking about the idea that, oh, you who believe, answer the call of Allah and the Rasul, إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ, when they invite you towards that which will bring you life. The fail is muzari, it's future tense. Which means that provided you constantly answer the call of the Prophet, there's constantly an idea of hayat and zindagi inside of you. And that's what we're trying to discover in these next now 5-6 days left with all of us. In today's discussion, we want to talk about a couple of fundamental concepts, and I really want all of you to stay with me tonight, inshallah. There are a couple of trends that we are seeing in our communities that need to be addressed. The concept of izzat in Islam needs to be discussed. In Surah Al-Munafiqun, it's very clear. The Quran says, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ لِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That izzat is only the exclusive property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that izzat is given to the Holy Prophet and to the mu'mineen, you and I, inshallah. But exclusively, izzat is given to Allah and by Allah. If you and I have any shu'rat, any izzat, anything, it's because of our nisbat to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we have any izzat, it's because of our nisbat to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. That's why Amir al-Mu'mineen says that the ultimate faqad for me is that I am your abd, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it is important for us to understand that the izzat that we have inside of us is an amanat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we have that self-respect inside of us, it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now when we live our lives in this part of the world as apologetic Muslims, as inferior Muslims, we have taken that amanat of self-respect and we've moved it aside, almost as if to say, Allah, this respect of mine is easily sellable to the affairs around me. This is not the time in this day and age to be apologetic. This is not the time to be inferior. We belong to that Islam, we belong to that madhab of the Ahlul Bayt that preaches superiority over any other Christian in this world. We belong to that madhab and we follow those individuals who were far superior than any other creation of Allah's. For us now to take that izzat and respect and turn it into a nature of being apologetic and low and inferior is disrespectful to the Ahlul Bayt. The reality is, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, the reality is that if you look at history, the maktab of the Ahlul Bayt, specifically from day number 1, from the moment the Holy Prophet left this world to today, has been the targets of the enemies in the world. They stripped the khilafat of our mullah. They killed and martyred our imams. They imprisoned and poisoned our imams. They killed our ulama. They burned our ahadith. They burned down our libraries. They destroy our books, bulldoze our homes, disrespect our women, kill our children, label us as fanatics. You and I have no business being part of a Shia faith that is progressing today. The Shia faith should have been dead a long time ago. But the strength of this faith in this part of the world today is because of the message of the Ahlul Bayt and because of the Qayem of Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura. We have a responsibility to take this Qayem and to apply it into our lives. That's why when we hide from these discussions sometimes of politics in Islam, it's not my topic, don't worry. We are reducing Islam to be one-dimensional. Islam has always been an entire encompassing package, a social package, an economic package, a political package. The establishment of the Islamic government in Medina by the Holy Prophet was political. Imam Hassan's sulh with Muawiyah was political. Imam Hussein's Qayem on the day of Ashura was political. The reason why you and I shy away from these discussions is because the word siyasat for us has a very negative connotation. We've taken the word siyasat to mean fitna. It doesn't mean fitna. Siyasat and politics is a reality in this world. What's happening right now in the Islamic world is politics. And Islam, we have to understand, is an encompassing package which includes politics. So when we shy away from these discussions, we reduce Islam to be simply a set of rules, like I said yesterday. And we're doing a great injustice to Imam Hussein and to the entire Makkah of the Ahlul Bayt by reducing Islam to a set of rules. Allah has granted us self-respect and dignity. And when we sell that respect out for this world, we're being disrespectful towards the amanat of Allah. And more importantly, when we strip the dignity and respect of our fellow brothers and sisters, we're doing grave damage to them as well. Right now, we have immense domestic issues in our community. It's a completely different topic. Inshallah, one day, someday, if Allah gives me tawfiq to come back to this community, we'll discuss domestic issues. What does it mean, family life in Islam? What was once an issue about getting our youth married is now an issue of keeping our youth married. Our divorce rates are increasing. We see our youth who are fighting and scrapping to marry the ones that they love, convincing their families. They get married, within 6 months they're divorced. Because this society teaches you about prenuptial agreements, signing contracts, making conditions, have one foot in the marriage, have 1 foot out of the marriage. So if something goes wrong, you can make a quick left, and khalas, out you go. Islam says no, make it work. And part of the problem is the respect that you and I strip from each other. The amount of bashing that we do. The amount of dignity that we strip from each other. This respect factor is important for us to build as a community. There will always be conflicts, my brothers and my sisters. It's a human natural urge and desire to conflict. Where you have a few dishes, you'll have noise. It's not a big deal to have a conflict. But why does it mean that ikhtilaf al-zahani becomes ikhtilaf al-qalbi? I'll never understand that. Where the ikhtilaf of your zahan and the difference of opinion means that I'm not talking to you or your family or your children. Why? Because you don't share in my opinion. This is not Islamic concepts. We have ikhtilaf everywhere. At the marajil level we have ikhtilaf. It's okay, it's not a big deal. Let's not get too excited. Why do Shias have 2 or 3 Eids? It's okay, calm down, take a deep breath. And I won't discuss the Eid Janafla, I'm not crazy. More or less suicidal. But this idea of understanding conflict amongst a brother and a brother is natural, it happens. Conflict between a mother-in-law and her beau is natural. But what is not natural is to cut off ties. It's to cut off communication. Some of you in this audience have individuals in your family who haven't even said salam to in months. Some of you in this audience have issues at home where you and your wife don't talk to each other. Some of you have issues with your kids where they don't even respect you anymore. And some of you who run this center or run other centers don't talk to each other. And in this day and age where we need to come together as one solid ummah, these things have to be removed from society. Respect and dignity is an amanat from Allah. You have no right to strip a mu'min of his dignity. But that's happening very easily. You see, we believe Tawheed. One salat, please, on Muhammad. I have a lot to say tonight. I'll be very, very quick. Stay with me, inshallah. Tawheed for us is a belief in the uniqueness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've been taught that, right? Ever since I've been 2 years old, or when you teach your 2-year-old child, Allah ek, Allah ek, Allah ek, this idea that Allah is unique in one. What we don't understand sometimes as youth is that Tawheed is not a noun, it's a verb. It requires action. What's that action? That you take everything you can in your life and you make it into one maqsad, one hadaf, one purpose. Or what you do is that you ask Allah to forgive you, and part of that request that you yourself become forgiving. The problem is that we beg Allah, oh Allah forgive me, oh Allah forgive me, oh Allah forgive me. Meanwhile, there are 2 or 3 people who are waiting for our forgiveness, and we refuse to forgive them. Years pass, we won't forgive them for a mistake that they made. We say, oh Allah, you are Satarul Uyub. You are the concealer of problems. You are the concealer of defects. And yet when it comes to us, when we are aware of someone else's defect, we make it very public to everybody that we know. We ask Allah, please hide my defect. In that same breath, you're exposing the defects of your brothers and sisters very easily. I'm not one to do ghibats, and you start. That's what we do. I don't want to mention names, but I'm pretty sure you know who this guy is I'm talking about. And you describe him to a T, like he can't be anybody else but this guy. And we think, oh, that's not ghibat, I didn't mention his name. You didn't have to mention his name. And then we wonder why we're not progressing as communities. We wonder why our youth are detaching themselves from the communities. We present such a tense mahal sometimes in our centers. These youth want to go everywhere else but here. And then we cry. We blame the mahal, we blame the West, we blame the ulama, we blame everybody. Have you created the right mahal to be able to say that anyone who walks into that door is welcome? It's important that we understand that. We are an ummah, we are a family. So the first point in tonight's lecture I want to make to all of you is I'll ask myself first, and you ask yourself. Is there anybody right now in your life that you have an immense problem with? That if you two were in the same room, you wouldn't even look at each other, let alone say salam. If there is someone like that, squash it tonight. Pick up the phone and apologize. If it's your family, God forbid, then do everything you can to fix that problem. I don't need to mention to all of you, mashallah, the importance of Silul Rahim in Islam. It's one of those ideas that prolongs your life in this world. It's one of those things where we actually have the destiny in our hand to make our life 65 years or 75 years. And part of that process to make sure that we have good ties with our family. Now, I'm making it sound so simple, and there are some really complex issues with our families. I get that. Every family has their issues. What I don't understand is that when you make your issues public to the world, keep your issues within your house. Keep your problems within the two of you. Everywhere your wife goes, all she talks about with her other women is what a horrible husband you are. That's all she talks about. And that, of course, triggers other women to talk about how bad their husbands are. Keep it within the home. Work at it in the home. Present your family as a dignified, respectful family. Don't give anybody a reason to make them feel like you are an undignified family. Because dignity and respect, I'll say it again, is the amanat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One salawat to Allah. Because the direct impact that this has on our spirituality is enormous. One discussion that we have to understand, and my youth especially, is the state of your qalb and heart in Islam. When you hold on to the baggage that sometimes we hold on to, when you allow all of these conflicts to overtake your heart, you're allowing this heart, that is the property of Allah, to not let Allah inside of it. We have a beautiful tradition by Imam Jafri Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. He says, Al-qalbu haramullah. The haram of Imam Hussein is in Karbala, the haram of Imam Raza is in Mashhad, the haram of Amir al-Mu'min is in Najaf, the haram of Allah is your qalb, Imam Sadiq says. Al-qalbu haramullah, wa la tuskin haramullah ghayrullah, and do not let anything reside in the haram of Allah except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have everything else in our qalb but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Grudges, conflicts, anger inside of our hearts. And then we wonder why we're not elevating as human beings. Then we wonder why we're not progressing as a community. Then we wonder why your iman is stagnant and static at the exact same level for X amount of years. When you enter or when you go into when you enter into space, you've seen these videos of these astronauts in space shuttles, right? It gets to a point where gravity now no longer exists up there. And you see this guy's literally floating inside the space shuttle, moving like in air, literally. There's immense philosophy behind that. As you elevate higher and higher and higher, the burden of gravity now no longer exists. You are free to travel wherever you want to travel. Our heart is the exact same way. These things that we have inside of our heart, the hatred, the tension, the pressures, the bugs, the conflicts, the arguments, this is gravity for our hearts. It grounds our hearts. It anchors our hearts. When Imam Sadiq is saying, Al-qalbu haramullah, this idea of what? Cutting the anchors of our heart, alleviating our heart from all of this garbage, lightening your heart, emptying your heart. Once your heart is emptied, gravity no longer is there, it begins to elevate to where it should go. And now you can travel wherever you want to travel to. That's why Amir al-Mu'mineen says to literally stand at the door of your heart and know who's coming in the heart, who's going out of the heart. Be the security guard of your heart. Because the Quran says that what will benefit you on the day of judgment, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَطَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ, is not your property or your children. The two things that we die for in this world, the two things that we die for in this world are our property and our children. And the Quran says that none of them will benefit you on the day of judgment. What will benefit you is the qalb salim, is that sahih and salim heart of yours, that's free of evil, that's free of error. Begin to cleanse your hearts. Begin to be somebody who responds with shar by being someone who's the ahl khair. It's the ultimate level of akhlaq in our books. That you respond to somebody's evil by being somebody who is just and good. The first thing our Holy Prophet did after Fatih Mecca was announce that Abu Sufyan, you are forgiven and you are safe in your home. Abu Sufyan was an individual who was the ultimate enemy of our Holy Prophet. He had that moment now to crush Abu Sufyan, but he didn't. He gave him security. And we think that's the Holy Prophet. That's not in our basketball. Yes, it is. That's in our basketball. That's how we need to be. We need to respond with every evil with goodness amongst our mu'mineen. If you want to say this idea of rising up against anybody, state it for the enemies of Islam, not for your fellow brothers and sisters. But it's the complete opposite. We forgive the enemies and we hold grudge with our mu'mineen. Islam says no. This ghazab that you have inside of you, this natural quwwat al-ghadabiyya that you have inside of you, is there for a reason. It's there to stand up against the enemies of Allah, not to be used for your family members. And we do it in the name of the Azadali of Muhammad Hussein alayhi salatu wa salam. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's constantly looking to preserve our own dignity. How many mistakes do we make behind closed doors, my brothers and my sisters? How many sins do we commit in private? How many times have we broken Allah's command with nobody knowing it but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And how many times does Allah expose those sins? I mentioned a tradition by Allama Majlisi rahmatullah alayhi on the very first day of our speeches. And I want to repeat that because it fits in our topic. And for those who were with me on that first day, I apologize for repetition, but it fits here and it also makes complete sense. Allama Majlisi narrates that there will be individuals, like I mentioned on the very first day, who will need to spend some time in the hellfire and then enter heaven. We're talking about the preservation of the dignity of you and I by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm going to tie that into something else later on. Now, when you spend time in the hellfire, it's going to be very obvious that you came from there. Like I mentioned on the very first day. There'll be scars and burns and scraps all over your face and body. And if you were somebody, inshallah, who's gifted with a straight pass into heaven, inshallah, then you won't have those scars and burns on your body. Your body will be simply beautiful and pure on the outside and on the inside. But this individual who need to spend a little bit of time in the hellfire, then come to the heavens, will have all these scars on his body. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala realizes this. And knows that if this person was to enter into the gardens of heaven with this state in halat, he'll be the topic of discussion amongst the Ahl Jannah. So Allah Majlisi introduces a pool, a body of water called Hayawan in heaven. Where this individual will enter the heaven, go straight to this pool, be cleansed up, so he looks exactly like the Ahl Jannah, so nobody can stop and question why this individual went to hell to begin with. And the water in that pool of Hayawan is comprised of the tears that you and I shed for Abdullah al-Husayn's soul. But look at the idea of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserving the dignity of a mu'min even in the hereafter. Where for a moment he doesn't want anyone to stop and think, I wonder what this guy did in this world to have to spend some time in the hellfire and now enter heavens. How much effort does Allah take to preserve the dignity of a mu'min, and how easily do you and I destroy that dignity of each other? Sometimes we gather, we sit together, we have no other topic but to talk about others. Very easily. You know, this idea of the ismat of the Ahlul Bayt. Let me very briefly touch on this for a moment here. One salam to Muhammad. Oftentimes we wonder, or at least ask ourselves, this idea of the ma'sumin being perfect individuals. They question it, they doubt it. How can a person be perfect? There are two factors here, and this is a lengthy discussion. I'll be very, very brief. One is the idea of the status of the yaqeen of the Ahlul Bayt, and one is the status of the resolve and the willpower and the irada of the Ahlul Bayt. On one side, they were able to understand the reality of certain sins and able to hold themselves back from performing those sins. And oftentimes, the very famous tradition of a person approaching our 8th Imam and asking him that how is it possible that you and your family claim that you are infallible and ma'soom? And the example that Imam Raza gives is this idea that no matter how thirsty you are, you will not drink a glass that has mud and dirt and filth inside of it. Because you realize how dirty and filthy that glass of water is. You could be dying of thirst, but you wouldn't come near that glass. And then he makes the example of the fact that sins in this world is like that filthy glass of ours. We don't come near it no matter how much we may want to. You and I also can achieve a level of ismat. There's ismat al-am and ismat al-khas. As many of you have heard, I'm sure, so far. There's this idea of the 14 ma'sumin that is ismat al-khas, that you and I can never penetrate. Then there's the ismat al-am. That if, for example, inshallah, your entire life you haven't had one drink of alcohol your entire life, you are ma'soom when it comes to the sin of alcohol. That's one level of ismat. You're able to identify and convince yourself that not only am I understanding the knowledge behind the guna of sharab, but also the effects it has on me, and I'm able to now, in this society, have the willpower to not even touch or hold a glass of beer, let's say, for example. But other sins we're not so lucky. We understand the effects of ghibat and slander in our books, but we're not able to hold ourselves back from doing it. We need to build that willpower. We need to be individuals who everyone else knows that when we begin to talk about others, this person will leave the room. In Khutbah 193, Khutbah Haram, Amir al-Mu'min describes the Ahl Taqwa to be that individual who doesn't commit sins to please the ones that he loves. That's what you and I do sometimes. We're invited to gatherings we have no business being in. We know full well it's a haram gathering, but it's our chacha's daughter, for example. And shirkat for us is wajib for some odd reason. We have to go. And so we'll commit the sin to please our chacha, for example. These are things that go against the Ahl Taqwa. Respect and dignity is not ours, it's a gift from Allah. Don't strip each other of that dignity so easily. Uphold that dignity. Where you have nothing khair to say about somebody, remain quiet. That's how our imams were, that's how our prophets were. They found the good in everything. A very famous story of Nabi Isa and his companions walking across a dead corpse of a dog, a disgusting corpse of a dog. And the companions made one comment after one comment about the disgusting nature of this animal sitting there. And Nabi Isa says, look how white and beautiful his teeth were when he was alive. There's flies and maggots all over this animal, ajib smell from this animal, but all Nabi Isa saw were white golden teeth of this dog. Where are you and I when it comes to these kind of akhlaqi points? Because the reality is that we need to change ourselves. That this reform, this Islam that we constantly talk about is very, very important. In history again, there's a reason why Amir al-Mu'min is telling his son, Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba alayhi wa salam, that learn from those individuals who lived before you. And you and I need to take lessons from history as well. Very, very quickly, they will move towards Messiah. There were two calls in history that we need to focus on. One call was from the Ahl Medina, and one call was from the Ahl Kufa. One call was during the time of our Holy Prophet in Yathrib, the city before Medina it was named, where a tribe called Khazraj and Aus existed there. These were tribes, as many of you know, that would fight for no apparent reason. They were looking for reasons to go to war. We have in our books that if the donkey of one tribe was to eat the grass of the house of another tribe, that would trigger a war for 100 years. It's the era of Jahalat. The head of one of the tribes was tired of fighting. They heard about this prophet in Mecca, made his way to Mecca, and introduced himself to the Holy Prophet and said, look, I need a solution from you about this problem I have with the other tribe. The Holy Prophet says, look, accept Islam, and your problem is solved. When the head of this tribe went back to Yathrib to deliver the message of the Holy Prophet, our Holy Prophet sent Musab ibn Amir, or Umair in some books, as the ambassador of the Holy Prophet. I'm going very quickly. There are details that I'm leaving out. When they both agreed on this idea of Islam, they invited the Holy Prophet to now settle in Medina. Saying, look, Ya Rasulullah, you're being very, very bothered here. Come to Medina and settle here. The Prophet of Allah waited for word from Mus'ab to say, look, are they legitimately Muslim? Are they ready for my arrival? Have they reformed their old ways? If not, then I'm sorry, I'm not going to make the move. Mus'ab wrote a letter saying, Ya Rasulullah, they're ready for you. Come and make the move. He made the famous migration from Mecca to Medina. They welcomed him with this grand istiqbal, and they were able to host the first Islamic government in this world. That's one call. The second call is that of the Ahl Kufa, that many of you have here every single year. Sheikh Abbas Qumi says 18,000 letters were written to Imam Hussein. He then says 25,000 Kufans came to Muslim ibn Aqil and placed their hand in Muslim's hand to say bay'at to Imam Hussein. Calling Imam Hussein, we are yateen, Mawla. We need you, Mawla. We don't accept Yazid as our Khalifa, Mawla. But the moment that things began to be a little bit rocky, they left the Imam's side. One was the call of the Ahl Medina, one was the call of the Ahl Kufa. The difference being what? The ability to reform themselves. The Ahl Medina completely changed their Jahil ways. And yes, there were munafiqeen in those groups as well. But overall, there was a change, a reform, an islah of the ummah. And then they were able to welcome and host the Holy Prophet. The Kufans weren't so lucky. Every single day we say, وَعَجِّلْ فَرَجَهُمْ. We call our Mawla. Are we ready for our Imam? If the Imam comes, are we going to be the Ahl Medina or the Ahl Kufa? Because the reality is that if there's any comparison to the companions and the ashab of Imam Hussein, it's the ashab of the Imam of our time. The Hussein of 61st Hijri needed companions, and the Hussein of today also needs companions. And our goal in life should be to be those individuals that will be beside the Imam when he arrives. I often tell my youth, I'll tell all of you as well, I'm not worried about being part of 313. I'm not shooting for that. What I am shooting for is a minor role in the Imam's army. Anything to do where the Imam says, Asad, I can use you. Come. Wash the bathroom, mop the floors, warm up the food, clean the shoes of the actual soldiers. Doesn't matter. I want to be able to be at that level when the Imam comes and establishes his justice in society, people can look at me and say, yeah, he is part of the army of the Imam. That's all I want. That's all I want. I want that nisbat. I want to be mansoob with the Imam of my time. And I'll do whatever it takes. And I may not have the tawfiq to be of those 313 khas ashab. But I know this idea that if there's any comparison to those levels of companions of Imam Hussein, it's the level of companions of Imam Zamana. And that's in our hands. Because the reality is that nobody had the ashab of Imam Hussein. When Allama Tabarisi, Sahib Tafsir Majul Bayan, reports a dream he had in his tafsir. He says, I was reading about the azamat of the ashab of Imam Hussein. And how not the Holy Prophet, not Mawla Ali, not the Fatima, nobody had the Ashab that Imam Hussein had. And for a moment he says, I had shak in my head. And with that shak, I went to sleep. In that dream I saw that night, I'm standing on the plains of Karbala on the day of Ashura in front of Imam Hussein. And Imam Hussein is saying, Tabarisi, it's time for Salat, but the army won't stop attacking us. I'm making you in charge of the fact that you're going to stand in front of our Jamaat and protect us from the arrows. Tabarisi says that I got happy, that my Mullah had a mission for me. I stood there in front of the Jamaat, and the first arrow came, it came right in front of my nose, and I ducked. It struck Imam Hussein in the chest. I woke up in a panic. I thought to myself, how is it possible that my Mullah asked me for something I couldn't do it? The next night, the exact same thing happened. The same conversation, the same mission. I stood there, the arrow came, again I ducked. And again it struck Imam Hussein in the chest. The third night, when I stood there in front of Imam and I'm crying, the Imam looks to me and says to Barisi, you have the gall to question my ashab? You have the gall to question Sa'id ibn Abdullah who took 20 arrows for me? My brothers and my sisters, when somebody throws something at you, it's fitri to duck and to protect yourself. These ashab were people who fought their own fitrat to protect their iman. These were not ordinary ashab. When Imam Hussein is giving them an opportunity to leave and closing out the line and blowing out the candle and all these words that you've heard 1,000 times, it's not something that we simply say and pass by. These were people who knew exactly what's going to happen to them the day of Ashura. And not one person moved. In fact, they would complain to Imam Hussein. When Zuhair ibn Qayyim is telling Imam Hussein that if they kill my body, trample my body, cut it into pieces, give that body life again, trample my body, cut it into pieces, and do this 1,000 times, some riwayat say, I would still be beside you about it. When Muslim ibn al-Sajjah is saying, Ya Rasulullah, we have to taste death anyways. What better way to taste death than beside you about it? And if we leave you now, how can we respond to your mother Fatima Zahra, who says, you left my Hussein, I am trying to be Ashura? The beauty of Imam Hussein's companions was that he had companions who were exempt shara'an from war in Islam. He had women, he had small children, he had old individuals. He had individuals as old as a 93-year-old Anas bin Harith, and he had a 6-month-old Elias. These were not companions of war. These are people who were exempted by Islam. And while I recite Al-Yasr Shahadat on Shab Ashur, just one ishara towards this musibah. It's enough for us to understand. To my mothers who are listening, who have infant children at home, when your child is hungry or thirsty, he or she cries a lot. They move around a lot. They're very big, they're very uncomfortable. But nowhere in our books do we say, when Imam Hussein was holding Al-Yasr, he was moving around in Imam Hussein's hands. He was crying. Nothing. We don't have any of that. In fact, we have the complete opposite. We have that Al-Yasr was completely still in the hands of Imam Hussein, such that some poets have said it's almost as if he's bringing the Quran out to them. The question is why? If Al-Yasr was as thirsty as they say he was, he should have been as an infant child, screaming and yelling. Ustad Tawakkul in describes in one of his dars that when a fish out of water goes through stages where when he realizes that he's not around water anymore, The first stage that that fish goes through is that it goes from its stomach to its back, its stomach to its back. When he knows that water is not coming for a while, he stops moving, his tail goes back and forth, back and forth. When water is still not coming, his mouth opens, his mouth closes. When water is still not coming, the very last stage, he's completely motionless, his eyes open, his eyes close. His eyes open, his eyes close. Our book tells that Ali Asad laid there in the hands of Imam Hussein, his eyes open, his eyes closed. The youngest ashab of Imam Hussein. The backbone of the companions of Imam Hussein was Habib ibn Madahir. The same Habib that on the 7th of Muharram, Bibi Zainab would remember Habib. And she would ask Fizza, she'd say, Fizza, is there nobody coming to help our Hussein? Is there not one army? No one has come yet. Do you not know that the grandson of the Holy Prophet is now in Karbala? She said, no, she has nothing. No one is here to help Imam Hussein. No one is here to help all of you. She calls Imam Hussein. She says, Bhaiya, I know that if you ask one individual, he will come running the moment you ask him to come. If you ask Habib, Habib will come. The same Habib who would follow Imam Hussein in his bachpana, and the footprints of Imam Hussein, he would take the khak from the footprints of Imam Hussein and put it on his head. The same Habib. Imam Hussein wrote a letter to Habib al-Mudahir. من الحسين إلى الرجل الفقير والعالم عادل زاهد فلان Habib al-Mudahir. Asking him that your Mawla has reached Karbala, asking you to come help him. After reading this letter, he was sitting at the table having a meal with his wife. His face changed. His wife asked him, what is it, Habib? It's a letter from my Mawla Hussein asking me to come help him. And she said, what are you waiting for, Habib? Your Mawla's asking you, go. When Habib arrived, the sounds of takbir could be heard. For the first time since the 2nd of Muharram, Imam Hussein actually smiled, the book said. And when Bibi Zainab heard the takbirat, she asked Jabir Fizza, what's happening outside? And she said that Habib is now here. On the day of Ashura, when it was time for Zohar prayers, Abu Samama comes to Imam Hussein and says, Mawla, I want one last prayer behind you before I leave this world. Imam Hussein goes to Habib and says, go ask them to pause the war for a moment while we pray Salat. Habib goes to Ibn Tamim and says, it's time for Salat. Pause your war, allow us to pray. This Mal'un says to Habib, tell Hussein, there's no point in praying. His prayer will not be accepted. Habib's Jalal then comes out and says that your prayer will be accepted as opposed to the prayer of the grandson of the Holy Prophet. Takes out his sword, begins to fight. Destroys Ibn Tamim. The books say this Habib, 62 men he killed. And every single time he struck one person, he would turn back and say, Assalamu alayka, ya Aba Abdullah. So these were individuals who would never fight Imam Hussein's army one by one. They were cowards. They surrounded Habib. One hit him in the chest, one hit him in the back. A shower of arrows came and struck Habib. Habib fell to the ground and became shaheed. When this qafila reached Kufa after Ashura, there was a small boy who was tugging on the pants of Imam Sajjad. When Imam Sajjad asked him, who are you? He said, I am the yatim son of Habib ibn Madahir. When Imam Sajjad says, Bibi Zainab, the yatim of Habib ibn Madahir is here, she asked that son, where is your mother? I want to send my condolences to your mother. Bibi Zainab was so worried about sending the condolences to the widow of Habib ibn Madahir, but there wasn't one individual to send condolences to Bibi Zainab. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. السلام عليكم.